Do movies need to be realistic? Advances in CGI technology have allowed computer graphics to look more and more realistic over the years, allowing the fantastical to also become more believable. This has given filmmakers incredible freedom to express their ideas. However, it has also given them a choice. Should they use CGI to stay close to reality or depart from it entirely? The general consensus is that the more realistic computer graphics get, the better computer graphics are, causing the industry to constantly chase this lifelike resolution. It makes sense after all. Bad CGI can be unimmersive. I believe good CGI fits the story it's trying to tell. I think one of the best examples of good CGI in movies is Transformers 1. It is by far my favorite movie out of the series. And part of the reason why I think it's so great is because it strikes this perfect balance between realism and fantasy. In fact, it uses its grounded realism to enhance the fantasy. The movie really takes time for the audience to get intimately involved and introduced to Sam Witwicky. We get to see him do class projects, try to impress the girl he likes, and getting arrested. All everyday problems we can all relate to. He spends the first quarter of the movie getting chased around by cars. I think what the first Transformer movie has over the recent ones is this sense of grounded scale. My favorite scene is actually where Sam brings back the Autobots to his house and they start accidentally destroying things. They have to somehow hide from being found by his parents. I think this is just such a great example of context. Just like a banana for scale, we only know how big something is by its relation to its environment. In this case, the house serves as the context for the absolute massive size of these robots, which is absolutely integral to their awe-inspiring nature.
Oh no! Look at the yard. The yard is destroyed.
I mean, look at this. This just looks cool.
Judy, better call the city. We got a blown transformer. Power poles sparking all over the place. Oh man.
Every environment in the first Transformers movie is realistic. It's set in this urban city with cars, roads, and buildings. The juxtaposition between these larger-than-life robots and the reality that we know lets the audience determine scale. But the latter movies lack this sense of scale. Which brings us to The Last Knight, the fifth movie in the Transformers franchise. Now, I didn't like this movie for a lot of reasons, but mainly the lack of realism. Everything just seemed too ridiculous. Everything here is just too big. The Transformers in The Last Knight, they don't have the same impact. In fact, they seem small. We have basically no frame of reference here. I don't know what any of this stuff actually is. They could be 1 foot tall for all I know. Even if the Transformers and the action sequences are cool, it's not composed in a way that allows the audience to understand the scale and the impact of the battle. Let's compare two fight scenes to demonstrate this. In Transformers 1, there's this beautiful action sequence where Optimus Prime fights Bone Crusher on a busy highway. The human perspective is what makes this fight a visceral fight. We are watching the fight from the perspective of a human bystander, looking up at these larger-than-life characters, creating a sense of immersion, like we are right there in the fight. Compare it to this scene in The Last Knight, where Optimus Prime is fighting Cybertron's knights.
You ugly mess.
This scene in The Last Knight seems lifeless in comparison. This fight is missing something, a sense of scale. We take the perspective of an omnipresent camera, with the bland environment providing virtually no sense of scale. It's unimmersive. The grounded nature of the first Transformers movie enhances the fantasy.
Fighter jets in 60 seconds.
By comparing our everyday struggles with the insane power of the Transformers, it makes the humans' triumphs over them even sweeter.
Weapons armed, status main.
So a sense of realism in a movie makes the action more compelling. Or does it? What if we had a movie that departed from realism altogether? You get Speed Racer. This 2008 movie, based on a 1967 Japanese anime, follows a man named, Speed Racer, as he tries to follow in the footsteps of his brother to become the world racing champion. It features crazy over-the-top visuals, a heavy use of CGI that ends up creating these stunningly beautiful scenes. Well, sometimes. You see, it was made by the same directors as The Matrix, a critically acclaimed movie praised for its innovative concept, visuals, and storyline. And their subsequent movie, Speed Racer, takes their visual innovation and, turns it up to 11. Speed Racer was by no means perfect. In fact, it was a box office failure. But in my opinion, it was a stylistic masterpiece. Speed Racer took the spirit of the anime and translated that into innovative, cutting-edge CGI. It has insane transitions, beautifully transitioning from one scene to the next. It feels so kinetic. It captures the beauty of racing in a visual form. It doesn't care about what racing actually looks like. It cares about showing you what it feels like. Dancing colors, insane transitions, over-the-top action. It perfectly encapsulates the childlike awe and excitement of racing. It disregards realism entirely, opting for a more surrealist impression of reality. If I were to apply my previous argument, I would say that Speed Racer would be boring. It has too much action without enough realism. But does this look boring to you? You see, Speed Racer takes the realism fantasy balance and steps outside of it altogether. It achieves this by oozing with style. Each race is extremely distinct in its style, always keeping the viewers on their toes. Both Transformers and Speed Racer are based off of an animated series, but they took different paths with their adaptation. Unlike Transformers, Speed Racer stays close to its origin of animation. Speed Racer doesn't even use the reality we know as its reality. It's set in this highly saturated cartoon world.
Hey Rex. Hey Pops.
Speedy, where's your friend?
Your name's
You see, animation doesn't have to follow the rules of reality. Instead, it has the ability to build its own world. The world of Speed Racer has been created, not to represent reality, but to represent the human experience, making it feel impressionistic, almost like a Van Gogh painting. Impressionism was an art movement that emerged in the late 19th century France, displacing the previous norm of realist paintings, opting for a more surrealist depiction of reality. Using bold colors, loose brushwork, and unblended colors, it creates a striking yet beautiful image. Impressionism is not focused on giving an accurate depiction of reality, but a depiction of the human experience, how a moment feels, rather than how it looks. Because it departed from many of the established rules of painting at the time, the Impressionist movement faced fierce rejection by the established institutions, which prized their strict conservative rule. The Académie des Beaux-Arts, or the Academy of Fine Arts, which controlled main exhibits such as the Salon de Paris. This resulted in many Impressionist masterpieces being rejected altogether. Their use of thick brushstrokes, bold colors, and emotional intensity were often considered to be blasphemy by the academic establishment of the time. Impressionist pieces that would be called masterpieces today were called unfinished and vulgar, with art critics such as Louis Leroy stating that wallpaper in its embryonic state is more finished. The art of Van Gogh, Monet, and other Impressionist artists like him were deemed imperfect. But who decides what perfect is? Well, the establishment does. And what was deemed perfect by the establishment were strictly realist paintings. The artist's job was to provide as accurate of a depiction of reality as possible, with Académie des Beaux-Arts professor Jean-Léon Gérôme stating, "The fact is that truth is the one thing truly good and beautiful, and, to render it effectively, the surest means are those of mathematical accuracy." The realists hated the Impressionists. If good art was all about mathematical accuracy, Impressionism was clearly not mathematical. You see, the Impressionists went in the face of everything the realists pride themselves on. But because of that, they were able to show the world that there was more than just reality. So what does Speed Racer and Van Gogh have in common? I think they both wanted to demonstrate the human experience, even at the expense of realism. See, Speed Racer is a form of Impressionism in film. The same colors and unrefined brushstrokes manifest themselves in CGI and pixels on a screen. And just like how the establishment hated Impressionism, the critics hated Speed Racer. They described it as gaudy, childish, headache-inducing. When everyone thought this was what a racing movie should look like, Speed Racer gave them this. Speed Racer does an incredible job of using its visuals to convey emotions. There's this one scene, the final race, the culmination of all his efforts and all the challenges he's had to overcome. The dreams, hopes, and fears of him and the people around him, all condensed into a few minutes. The transitions fly by between the actions of Speed and the reactions of his family and the announcers. The past and the present meld together, showing that the racer he is in this moment is a culmination of all the experiences he's had so far. His surroundings melt away into a dancing light. We no longer hear the roar of the engine or the cheering crowds, only the soft voice of his inner thoughts. From last place, he passes car after car. He is in the zone. Performers describe flow as becoming at one with the activity, leading them to enter another reality in which they are entirely absorbed by what is being undertaken. F1 driver Lewis Hamilton describes it as the perfect zone of clarity. In the 2020 Spanish Grand Prix, he was so absorbed in the act of driving, he didn't even realize he had finished the race. "I was in a different zone then," said Hamilton on the radio after taking the checkered flag. "I didn't even realize it was the last lap." Through the use of surrealist visuals, Speed Racer puts you in the mind of the driver. The experience of being absolutely in the zone, where everything except the very act of driving melts away. It uses its visual effects to connect us deeper with the experience of racing. It's not that realism makes a better movie or worse movie. It's about how it's used.